I was so excited for today's video as I went and gathered up some scraps of paper from the garbage bin, the recycle bin, because today we are making paper. And let me tell you, it is so much fun. Let's get started. So I got this paper making kit from the thrift store several years ago for $1.50. It comes with the mold and decal and sponge, but the one thing it didn't come with was the instruction booklet. So I looked up how to make paper online. Now you could make your own decal and mold. All you need to do for the mold is staple mesh onto a picture frame, and that is good to go. I also grabbed an old sheet here. I was going to tear it up for rags, but I'm like, no. When I decided I was going to make paper for a video, I knew that this sheet would be perfect for this. So I just took my frame here and I laid it on top of the sheet, and I'm going to tear it down to size, and I'm going to be using this whole sheet for this project. So I had lots to work with. I am going to be trying out a couple of sheets of just regular cotton fabric or cotton sheets as well, because the texture from your fabric is going to imprint on your handmade paper. So you play around and experiment with fabrics. Next, I am diving into my bin of scraps that are left over from different projects. You can see it is overflowing. So I wanted to just dive in here, gather up some different papers that I thought would work to make different papers. And I found that like copy paper was great, and so is cardstock. I'm also going into my recycling bin here. As you can see, I wasn't sure if something like the packaging or like Kleenex box would work, but here's some more cardstock. I didn't have that much in here because I emptied it out not long ago. I also went into my kitchen recycling. I didn't have anything there. I also went out into the garage recycle bin before we took it out to the curb. So I gathered up some envelopes, old notes, some backing off of napkins, just whatever I had in my stash. I gathered it together. And I also had some paper bags and leftover packaging from like shoe boxes or Amazon packages. Just experiment with your papers. Sometimes things will work out really well and other times it won't. With envelopes, you are going to need to remove the plastic that's on the inside. Here, I thought I could just rip it out, but I ended up just cutting it out. And if there's any tape on any of your papers as well, you're going to want to remove that too. Now we need to break down our paper into smaller pieces. This is an old grocery bag. I'm just going to tear it up here. Now, there's a few ways that you could do this. I am just going to use scissors by just folding up my paper and then cutting it down into strips, but you could use, say, a paper guillotine, a paper cutter of some type. You could also use your paper shredder. But I thought this was accessible for everybody, and you just want to gather up your strips and then cut it down into smaller pieces. So I'm cutting just different colors down and different types of paper down, and I'm putting them I'm putting them into a Ziploc bag. I'm going to set them aside. I like to do my paper cutting all in one shot here. So I'm just ripping up my cardstock because it's kind of in awkward pieces. This is left over from die cutting projects. I really liked the cardstock, and you'll see here why in a bit. But yeah, I just went through all my papers, broke them down, and then put them all into Ziploc bags so they were ready to go for me to use. My little kitty cat, he could not resist crawling into this bag of paper. It was so funny. So I'm going to be sharing some tips and tricks that I have learned along the way. I'm going to have some videos from other paper crafters listed down below, those who know what they're doing when it comes to handmade paper. And I learned a lot from them. It's pretty forgiving, but I will say you need to have a lot of grace with yourself because you're not going to necessarily get it perfect right away. This is literally the very first time I have ever tried to make paper. Did I get it right the first time? No, I didn't. All right, so to prepare your paper, you're gonna wanna put your paper bits into a container. I'm using just a clear glass jar just so you can see, but you just wanna fill it up with your paper, again, any container, and then you're gonna add water and you wanna fill it up so all the paper is covered. You can always push the paper down if you like. You wanna let it soak for several hours. So as far as all the different papers that you want to try out, you're just gonna have to experiment, and I did. One thing I tried was paper bags, because I think a lot of us do get grocery paper bags over the years, and if you're a crafter, you probably have saved those bags. You can also use packaging from, say, Amazon shipments, or you know how they fill your boxes up with that craft paper? You could use that. And one thing I will say about those papers, especially the grocery bags, is that, well, they are made to be sturdy. I did not soak my paper long enough, and you'll see here how the pulp just kind of wanted to stick together. So I think I would try it again for sure, and I would soak my papers longer, the grocery bags, but I also might incorporate some other paper in with it. Maybe that will help to break up the globs of pulp in the water. And you'll see here how it just wants to stick together. And well, honestly, it was getting a little frustrating. All right, so this was a mistake I made right here, and that was adding all of my paper pieces to my blender. Now, this is an old blender. I picked it up from the thrift store for $3 and it still worked. This is like one from, I think, the 70s or the 80s, but I thought it would be perfect for paper crafting. Use any blender, you just wanna make sure you use it strictly for your crafting needs. But you can see, I put it all in there and it was just too much for the blender, and I struggled to get it to blend. I couldn't remember how the buttons worked on this one either, so you could see me pressing all the buttons trying to get it to stop. And then I finally remembered you have to press the red button to get it to stop. Anyway, so I did slowly kind of pulverize it, and eventually it broke through all of it. You may need to add some more water as you go to help break it down. But I definitely think next time, well, you're gonna see, I do like pulverize it into smaller batches, and it just worked so much better. I will again say that like you'll see that how chunky this pulp was. So here I'm adding some more water, and then I'm gonna go ahead and blend it. This is gonna just depend on your blender, and the paper you're using will determine how long you want to use it. Once you're done, you're gonna wanna pour it out into a separate container. You are going to want to rinse out your blender if you don't want any of those brown paper bits to be in the next batch of pulp that you're going to make. So I suggest using a strainer, lining it with cheesecloth. That way here, when you dump the water in your sink, all those pulp bits are going to collect on your cheesecloth, and you can scrape them off and use them again. Okay, so here is my pulp here. It's all ready to go. Now here I have made some white paper, and you can see I've done it into smaller batches. I had the same amount of the white copy paper as I did of the brown paper bag. And I will say this broke down so much easier. I had it soaking for about the same amount of time. And yeah, I was really happy with how this was. All the rest of my papers, except for the brown paper bag, broke down really, really nicely. So that's why I say I think definitely letting the brown paper bag soak longer, and also doing your paper pulping into smaller batch, like breaking it down in smaller batches, will just make it so much easier for you. There's going to be lots of different ways that you can color your paper. You could use some dyes, inks. You could try using paint, maybe watercolor. I found that the best way was actually to use construction paper. You know, the stuff that the kids would use for paper crafts when they were little. Also, I found that cardstock, oh man, there's a lot of dye in those papers. So that made a really good way to color your paper as well. Here's all the different batches of pulp that I am going to be using in my paper making. So I've got a bin here that fits my decal and mold. and it's halfway filled with water. I also have my fabrics on the side and my sponge. I'm gonna start to add my pulp. Now, you are going to need more pulp than you actually think you're gonna need. So just start to mix it in and then slowly add it in and mix in between, especially this one because the texture is quite kind of thick with the brown paper bag. So mix it really, really well. You could see how it's really wanting to settle here. That was another thing that I had found with the brown paper bag, is that it really did want to settle out. So I kept on adding some. I probably added at least half of what I had in my container, and just again, mix it really, really well. So I'm just gonna grab my mold and my decal, and you want to place it in. I started off going from myself and then swooping away from me. And then you wanna kind of shimmy and shake it back and forth gently. But this is the very first time I've done this, and I will say it didn't quite turn out the way I had hoped. It was kind of patchy in a few spots. So I just kept on playing around until I got the right feel for this. That's why I say that this is a forgiving craft, because if you don't get it right away, well, that's okay. You can just clean it off and try again. And different paper pulps are going to also react differently. I decided to add a bit more pulp because it was really thin in a few spots. So I thought, well, maybe I need to add some more pulp to my water bin. So I'm going to go ahead, mix that in, and I'm going to try it again. This time also, I realized too, I was probably shaking my mold and decal too much. So I'm just swooping it away from myself again, which I end up changing a little bit here. But here I'm just trying to, no, sorry, I didn't slow down. I was jiggling it too much. And I looked, I'm like, okay, now it's showing waves. So just dipped it in again, rinsed off my mold, just kept playing until I got it right. Okay, they say third time's the charm, right? Well, let's give it another try. And sure enough, it was a whole lot better. There was still the odd little funny spot, but the next thing I suggest is, like, I drained off the water. You want to be careful when you do that because the pulp will slip. So just don't do it too much. But here you saw, I laid it upside down onto my fabric. Now I'm taking my sponge and I'm squeezing this all out. The water is going to soak through your other pieces of fabric, and that is okay. I also have a chamois that I got from the dollar store. I think I got it from Dollar Tree. It's on the very bottom, and that's going to help soak up water as well. Now, I didn't see other people doing that, but I decided to give that a try just to see, and it does help kind of contain the water because it is really messy. So I focused on the edges really well with the sponge, and I just kept on going until the paper released. Now, one trick that I didn't do was to pull your fabric tight as you were removing your mold. That is really important, as I found out from another video that I watched, but it still worked. So I set that sheet of fabric aside. I'm going to add more pulp to my water and mix it in, and then I'm going to go ahead and try to make another sheet of paper. This time around, I'm just trying to plunge my mold and decal straight in and moving it around. I really need to be a little bit more gentle with that. And now I'm just letting the water drain off, removing the decal, and then just draining off the water just a little bit. And I allowed it to sit there too long, and that is when the pulp started to slip. So you do want to be careful not to allow the water to drain off too much. Now let's try out the copy paper. You can see my water is all clean. I dumped it out into the colander with the cheesecloth to clean all that water out and dump it down the sink, and I just put some fresh stuff in. Now I'm putting the copy paper pulp in here, and you can see it is mixing in with the water so much better. I'm just going to continue to add some until I am happy with how much is in there, and you want to test it out every once in a while just to see the coverage of the pulp, and you can always add more if you need to. Okay, so I've got my mold and decal, and this time I'm starting from away from my body, and I'm pulling it towards me, and I'm also being very gentle with how much I am shaking this back and forth. And that was a lot better. So I do recommend starting away from you, swooping your decal and mold away towards you, gently shaking it to settle the fibers onto your mesh, and then gently draining it just a little bit here. I did notice that the copy paper, it held to the mesh a lot better than the paper bag. Now I've got that onto my fabric, pressed it down with the sponge, and here we go. It released, and this released really, really nicely. So at this point, my fabrics were getting really wet, and you can see my chamois on the very bottom is soaked through. So I'm just gonna squeeze that out. Like I said before, the chamois is not a step that others use, but I just was trying to kind of contain the water because this is messy. So I just was working in my kitchen and I didn't want a really big mess to clean up in the end. All right, so I'm just gonna get some more fabric ready to go here. I just wanted to try this thin cotton sheet again, and I'm gonna continue to make some paper. I wanted to try the construction paper, so I'm gonna mix a handful. This is the red color, mixing it into the white paper, and it ended up turning pink. And it was such a pretty color. I was amazed at the dye that was coming out of this pulp and just the pretty shade of pink that we had created here. So same thing as before, going from away from myself, pulling it through, and then just gently shaking it. You can see how much gentler I'm being. And just again, followed all the steps from before and then continued on. You can see how pretty that pink is. I really am so happy with how this turned out. This was the one thing that I absolutely regretted doing, and that was adding lavender. What a mess. You're gonna see how it just floats on the top. It's not submerging. The smell, I like lavender, but I started sneezing. It was just too much. So I will never use lavender again in my handmade papers. All right, so here are my lavender buds. I'm sprinkling it in and I tried to mix it in and I had instant regret. I'm like, oh no, it's not mixing into the pulp. It's all floating at the top. It was sticking to my hand and the scent was just so strong and overpowering. And then I went and put my mold and decal into the mixture and it was still sticking to my hand. It was sticking to the mold and the decal and it was all floating on top of my paper slurry as I was shaking out the water, and you can see it's just stuck to the top. So yeah, I don't recommend that, but you could add some seeds, you could add some leaves and some flower petals. Experiment with that. I did add some leaves and some seeds to some of my paper and that actually worked well. But this lavender, oh, it's just so messy. Oh, I just had so much regret doing this. And here too, like it wasn't coming off. So I got a knife and I tried to like work at just separating it from the mesh, and here it was. And then I'm like, okay, well, let's just continue to work on it here, and it just wasn't lifting. So I was just getting so frustrated with this, and I ended up just flipping it over and I just pulled it off. I thought if I ripped the paper, I didn't really care at this point. I was seriously just so annoyed with it. And the smell was just so overwhelming. I tried to pat it down to get it to stick to the fabric, but it wasn't at this point. Yeah. I didn't realize at the time when I was gathering up my papers, prepping everything, envelopes, well, they've got adhesive on them, and that is going to affect things for you. I didn't clue in right away, and then I was talking to my mom about it, how I was just struggling with this one batch of pulp where the sheets of paper just kept on sticking to the mesh, and I ended up kind of like flicking the mesh to get it off, and my daughter was like tapping on it, and I was just doing all the tips and tricks that the people, like the professionals, do, and it was just not coming loose. Well, my mom said to me, she goes, I didn't mention that it was envelopes. I just said, man, I just had this one batch of paper that I just could not get to work for me. She's like, makes you wonder if maybe there's adhesive in that paper. I'm like, yes, that's exactly it. Why didn't I think of that? There's adhesive on envelopes, you know, where you seal it around the edges to hold it all together to form a pocket. Yep, that totally makes sense. Once I added other paper pulp to it, it did end up coming off of the mesh a lot easier. So that's a tip for you. So here is the envelope paper. I did end up tearing it, but it's still usable and I was happy with that. This is some with some leaf material in it. The leaves are on the underside, and this was just a mix of all my leftover pulp all in one, and we had fun with it, throwing some paper confetti in. So I just hanging it up. I'm putting it in my basement here, and I'm just clipping this onto a drying rack, and I allowed this to dry overnight, and in the morning we'll wake up to a surprise. So I definitely plan on doing this again because, like I said, it's just so much fun. But one thing I'm going to do is start to expand on what I'm going to be using, what I'm going to include into my paper, and see all the different things that I can come up with. Okay, it's the next day, and here are all my papers. So this one came loose, and you can see it's got some pretty little leaves in it. That had the cardstock green color in there. Here I'm pulling off another sheet. This has got a mix of the cardstock green and the brown paper bag, and this one as well. I had so much fun doing this. This actually was probably one of the most satisfying parts, peeling it off. This is another envelope paper sheet. And then this is the one that's got all the mixed colored and leftover pulp, and we threw in some paper confetti for fun. And wait until, this one here, this has got the seeds in it. That actually worked really well. But the lavender, here it is. And the smell was just so overpowering. And I went through each sheet and I rubbed off all the lavender because none of it was embedded. But I will say it did leave an interesting texture on the paper, so that was fun. Here's the brown paper bag. Those ones turned out really well. For the most part, I was really happy. I love the look of rice paper, or also known as mulberry paper. It's absolutely beautiful, but it's expensive. I thought for a bonus segment, I would show how you can make faux rice paper / mulberry paper for your crafting needs. Now, I followed some other tutorials on how people created these themselves, and I'm wondering if it didn't work exactly the way I had hoped, and I'll show you why. But I'm actually kind of wondering, perhaps it was just the glue that I was using. So let me show you. Okay, you're going to need the leftovers from napkins, or you want tissue paper, or even some sewing pattern paper. You're going to need a container, some water, some glue, a craft mat, and a soft bristle brush. I'm putting some of my glue into this container, and you can see how thick and gloopy it is. Gloppy. I don't know. It's just gross, actually. It's an old bottle of glue. And this is just some cheap stuff I got from my local dollar store. Next, I'm adding some water to this, and I'm going to mix it up really well. You do need this to be watery. That is important, but you kind of want it to be a thicker consistency. I don't want to say maybe runny applesauce. I don't know. Just play around, kind of experiment. Just make sure it's mixed really well. Now, if you've done this before, let me know the type of glue you used. I had seen other people use Elmer's. Maybe Elmer's glue is the best option to do. All right, so on my craft mat, I'm going to spread some glue with my soft bristle brush here, about the same size as the napkin piece that I have here. I'm just kind of eyeballing it. You could mark and create some registration marks if you'd like. I know the tutorial that I learned this from, they use some registration marks, but I found that I just kind of eyeballed it and it worked just fine. And you could always go underneath the edges and add some extra if you need it. Put my napkin into place, and now I'm going over it again with my glue. And I'm starting from the center, or it's best to start from the center and then work your way out. I'm okay that there's wrinkles. In fact, you want some because it'll give the illusion of that mulberry paper. All right, so that was my first experiment. Here I've got another piece of napkin. Now I'm using these Dollar Tree craft mats that you get in the kitchen section. That's the size that I'm working with, but I think you could probably use like Teflon sheets. Maybe you could use parchment paper or wax paper. But I thought, well, I've already got these craft mats on hand, so I'm going to use those. So I tore my napkin down to size. It's just the backing of patterned napkins. I'm going to go ahead and put my glue all over my mat again, and then I'm going to put my paper down onto the glue. Now, I'm not too worried about those lines that are in the napkin. I found that once you started to apply the glue, they did disappear. So you can try to pull them out if you'd like. That's just up to you. I didn't want to accidentally tear my napkin. You also want to be gentle with your application of your glue because you could accidentally tear it. You'll also want to make sure you've got lots of glue on your brush when you apply it to the surface. So for a little experiment, I decided to try and add some pressed fern leaves that I had in my stash. And so I'm just going to add some here and there. You could also add some pressed flowers if you like. Just make sure they're nice and thin. Once you're happy with the placement of your leaves, you can then take some glue and just brush it over gently over your leaves like you see me doing here. I will also mention too that the sheet underneath is still wet with the glue that we added before. So I needed to add some more glue onto the leaves because we're adding another layer of our napkin. Now I hadn't tore this down yet, so I'm just kind of eyeballing it with the piece that we had tore off from the first sheet. So I'm just gonna quickly rip that off, and you could set that aside or just throw it away in your recycle bin if you'd like. Now I'm going to just place that sheet over top of the fern leaves and the other piece of some napkin, trying to line it up best I can, gently tapping it down. Now I will say that there was a bit of an odor, and I think that was just from the organic smell of the fern leaves. It kind of smelled a little off, but maybe it's the mix of the glue and those fern leaves. I'm not sure, but it does dissipate, so you don't have to worry. So I covered it all with the second layer of glue, set it aside, and I'm allowing it to dry. Some things you can mix into glue is some acrylic ink. This is some Liquitex acrylic ink. It's transparent, comes in different colors. Some coffee. You could also use some food coloring. Maybe some watercolor would be fun. You could also add some tea leaves, which is something that I decided I wanted to try. And some of those tea leaves will actually color your glue as well. So this sheet here is actually from a shoebox. You know how you can get that tissue stuffed inside your shoes or wrapped around shoes? Well, you can use that too. So I'm just going to tear some down to size here. And I decided I wanted to try some coffee. The coffee is going to give kind of a vintage look to your paper. You don't have to use coffee. You could try tea as well if that's what you prefer. So just as before, you want to add your glue and your coffee together, mix it well, and then you're going to apply it to your craft mat. Another note I'm going to make here is that I am painting this on the matte side of the craft mat. There's a shiny side and then there's a matte side. So I didn't want there to be too much shine on my papers, so that's why I decided to work on the matte side. Here you can see I'm adding some extra glue around the edges underneath because I missed a few spots. And now I'm going to go over it with my coffee glue solution, and you can see the color change right here and how pretty that looks. Okay, one more quick experiment. You can see this napkin's got the shadow of the pattern that this napkin came on. Like this is the backing of a napkin. It's probably like a 2 or 3 ply napkin. And sometimes the image shadow is going to be on that underlayer. I decided I wanted to try the tea. Now this tea, I actually don't even know what tea this is, but I started to mix it in with my glue and water solution, and it did not stain the glue. Some might, like if it's like say a rosehip tea, well, that might stain your glue solution. So you, again, experiment and play around to see what you like best. So again, same thing, I'm gonna add my glue solution, but one thing with this one is that if you played around with it too much, it ended up pulling some of the tea off. So you do want to be careful how much you play around with this. You want to make sure you've got enough of those little tea leaves on your paintbrush when you apply it to your napkin, well, both the craft mat and the napkin. So I'm just being very careful, making sure that I've got some of those tea leaves throughout the napkin. Here it's all nice and done. I'm going to set these all aside and allow them to dry well. Okay, so this one's all dry and it actually came loose right away. You can see one side is shiny, the other side is matte. I wanted to see how durable it is, so I'm crunching it up in my hand. And this is when I discovered that maybe my glue that I used was not the best. It did tear in one spot, and then I did kind of experiment here and there to see how it would tear, and well, yep, it did tear. Those mats, by the way, are washable, so you can reuse them. This one has got the coffee on it, and I really like the color. I think it's pretty. You could use a stronger color coffee if you'd like to get a darker color. But yeah, I was really happy with it. But again, see, this one's tearing. This one's got the tea leaves, and you can see that the ghosting of the napkin image is still there, and it looks really pretty with all the flecks of the tea leaves. But again, I tore it, and sure enough, it just, I don't know, the one tutorials I've seen, they said that it was supposed to be nice and sturdy. So that's why I'm wondering if it was my glue. So the fern leaves, it wasn't fully dry underneath, so I pulled it up, and here you can see I'm using my blow dryer to dry it further. It wasn't dry underneath where all the ferns were, and I think it was just because it was just thicker there. So I blew dry that with my hair dryer that I got in my craft room. I tested this one out since there was a double layer, and sure enough, it tore too. But you know, I started thinking about it. I'm like, I'm not going to be like messing around with this too much. So I thought, let's just play around with it and let's just go for it. If you can recommend a glue, awesome. Next time, I'm going to try this dollar store heavy gel medium, but you can use the Golden brand as well or other brands and mix it with water. Okay, so you've got all these handmade papers. What are you going to do with it? I'm going to show you 3 simple, very simple, easy ways that you can incorporate it into your crafting. It's been so much fun. So I decided just to create some simple projects. I'm using a card base here that I got from my local dollar store, and it's kind of like an off-white color. I'm also going to grab the envelope because I want to test to make sure that when we're done making the card, it's going to fit inside the envelope. So here I am just figuring out which way I need to fold it. I don't know why, but I always forget which way to fold it. And then I'm going to take some measurements of my card here so I know the size that I need to cut down my handmade paper to. I'm just going to use my steel ruler, and I'm just going to tear the paper along the edge. I figured that that would create a bit more of a rough edge rather than using scissors. Okay, time to decorate. I'm going to use these washi stickers that I had. I couldn't decide which one I wanted to use, so I'm going to just see what they both look like. I decided to go with the shorter rose one. That way here I could stick something else underneath it because I've got some word stickers I'd like to use. So for a tip, a viewer told me to use 2 pieces of tape on a sticker and then pull those apart to try and get these stickers apart. It pulled off of the backing, but I was able to lift the front sticker, but I think I might have been doing this tip wrong. So if you got pointers, please leave that down in the comment section for me, just to make it easier for me to take these particular stickers apart. So I'm going to go ahead and put the sticker in place, and I'm using a bone folder to smooth it out. You can see I've got a little bit of space underneath the rows. That is where I'm going to stick some word stickers. I've got this little package here. I'm just going to select the one that says just because. You could cut some words out of magazine, out of a book. You could type some up and then print them out and cut them down. I'm using a glue stick all over the back of this. I'm just using the Dollar Tree brand here. I'm trying to be generous with how much I add on the back. Because this is slightly wet glue, it's going to react with the paper a little bit. So I am being careful with how much I apply because I didn't want to accidentally tear this. So I'm going to go ahead and put that into place, and then I'm going to smooth it out, and we're going to see how it fits inside the envelope. I have to say, I think this is really pretty. You can make up a whole bunch of these, and then they'd all be ready to go to decorate for some different gifts. So I wanted to see how this paper would perform with a die cutting machine. So I dug out my Sizzix, and I've got this really nice tag die, and I thought, well, let's make a tag. So I'm just gonna go through my papers, select the one I wanted to use. I decided I wanted to try the one that was made out of the envelopes. I will say it kind of felt a little bit sturdier, so maybe that glue is going to be a benefit. I'm not sure, but anyway, so I'm placing the die cut into place, and I'm going to go ahead and cut that paper down to size so then I can fit it into my Sizzix machine. So I'm going to go ahead and put this into my cutting plates, and I like to use a little bit of washi tape to help just tape it down along the edge. That will help to prevent the die from moving. Now, I do not know how it's going to perform with a Cricut machine. That is going to be something I want to try. I have a feeling that you're going to need to use a really nice sharp blade when you do that, because it could just kind of tear it. But I don't know, that's going to be a later experiment. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut this tag out. I usually do 2 passes with my Sizzix machine. I started 2 there, and I'm like, no, let's see how it cut just with 1 pass. And I tested it out, and sure enough, it cut through just fine. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove everything, and then we're going to start to craft with this. So in addition with this, I decided to try my faux mulberry paper. This is the napkin that's got kind of the shadowing from the napkin image, and it's got the T on it. I'm just going to cut a piece down to size. I'm only going about I'd say maybe halfway up the tag here, and then I'm going to go ahead and tear the edges. I didn't want that crisp, clean, sharp edge from the scissors, so I decided to tear it down, as I wanted to create a little bit of a pocket on the front of the tag. To adhere my little piece of napkin, I'm going to be using this thin double-sided tape. I got it from my local dollar store. You could use a thin bead of wet glue if you'd like. So I'm just going to go ahead and add some just on 3 sides of our faux mulberry paper. Once you have your tape in place, you can then burnish it down. I like to use my bone folder, but you can use your scissors as well. And then I'm using a Cricut weeding tool here just to lift up the backing of the tape. You want to do that for all sides, and then you're going to press this into place on the bottom of your tag to create the pocket. And I also like to burnish the sides down as well. Now you're going to see that it is a little bit loose. I actually wanted that because that gives me some room to put something inside. All right, so I'm going to just use this string that I had on hand. It was fraying on the end, so I'm adding a knot. I wanted just to add a little embellishment by adding this to the top hole of our tag. So I folded it in half, created a loop, and then I'm going to create a couple of tails here pull those tails through the loop and pull tight. And then I'm going to tie off a knot on the other end of one of our tails there. I have these really pretty little paper embellishments. One's a quote and then one's a little like market tag. I'm going to slip that inside the pocket. Now you can give this just as is. You can like add it to a package if you'd like, or maybe put like, I don't know, some money in there maybe. I'm not sure. I thought it was just kind of a fun way to use this paper. But I felt like it was lacking, so I wanted to try out inking the edges. So I got this pretty pink ink. I'm going to just use my makeup sponge, add it all the way around the edge, and it accepted that ink really well. And it went well with these little embellishments that I'm adding inside the pocket. I really do think this is a really fun way to create a gift tag for any package. So here's all the rest of my papers, and I also have the fern paper. I wanted to add some to this handmade journal that I had made. I'm going to have the tutorial on how I made this down in the video description. I was using it as a nature journal, but then it's kind of ended up being like a sample journal of some different paper projects that I've done. All the ones that I've gotten here, I'm going to link those videos down below because there's like some flower pounding, and then there's like some printable book pages, and there's like this quilted bookmark, some more flower pounding or flower hammering. You can see to hold all the pages in, I had this elastic that was in the middle, and this makes it so it's easy to take those pages out. You could add more to it or take some out. I'm just going through my stack of handmade papers, trying to decide which ones I wanted to include in my journal. I decided to add the leaf with the seeds, and I'm also going to add one of the envelope pages. And in the end, I also wanted to add one of the grocery bags. I also wanted to include the one with the ferns. I actually did make that page so it would go in this journal, but I made it too big. So what I decided to do was, first, I'm going to prep these pages by just folding them in half. Those ones are going to fit perfectly inside my journal. I don't have to tear anything down. But the one with the fern leaves, like I said, it was too big. So I tore it down to size. And it was just really simple. This tore really easily, as I tested out earlier. And then I'm just going to tear along the top and the bottom just so that it's got an even texture. So I'm going to go ahead, fold it in half here, and then I'm going to kind of measure again just to see how it is. It's still a bit too big, but I just went ahead and tore the edges again until it was down to a size that I was happy with. So I wasn't sure where I wanted to place this. I was trying to see if I wanted to fit it inside my journal, but what I actually ended up doing was using it to cover all of those pages, and I was really happy with that. Now I decided I'm going to figure out the placement of all those handmade papers. Now with a journal like this, if you find that it's getting too bulky like mine is, you can pull some of these pages out, especially if some of these pages aren't being used. These dye-colored ones, I will have a video for that as well because I have a tutorial on how you can do that too. This journal has been so much fun. It is full of some fun, crafty experiments. So once you're happy with the placement of all your pages, you could go ahead and move them around later on if you're not happy, but you're gonna put these, what's called signature, into place. And I'm gonna grab my elastic and I'm gonna go ahead and put that in the middle, and then it's all ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and put my bookmarks back into place as well. I'm really happy with how those papers look inside my journal, and I can't wait to start to experiment some more with these handmade papers. I have so many more recycling ideas in this playlist for you to check out right here. I want to thank you all so very much for joining me today, and we will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.